Okay, we have time for one more question, which is transport related and takes us a bit out of Barnet by speed. Chris Kapolka.
Yes. Will the HS2 project be a worthwhile investment for the infrastructure of Britain?
Okay, this is the high-speed railway that's supposed to go from London up to Manchester, I believe?
Manchester and beyond.
Manchester and beyond, and cost, well, no more than 50 billion. Peter, would you like to start?
Okay, the short answer is absolutely, no doubt about it. This country needs HS2 yesterday. It will make a huge difference to transport in this country. Those of you who know me will also know that for the past 19 years I've been a Eurostar driver. I've been driving high-speed trains from London to Paris and Brussels. And I was part of the Eurostar project when it first started, before we actually even had trains. And I spent a lot of time in France driving their TGV trains around France, just learning to drive it to just under 200 miles an hour. And I got to know, I lived with families over there because part of the requirements to be a Eurostar driver is we have to speak fluent French. And so the company sent us to live with families in France. And by living with these families, who weren't railway families, but they, by living with the French families out there, it became very apparent very, very quickly how much the French are in love with their TGV system. I mean, it's transformed France. When I first started going to the south of France for my holidays back in the early 1970s, it used to take me well over 12 hours, 12, 14 hours to get from London down to Marseille, Toulon, around that area. Now you can get from London to Marseille in under 6 hours. It's incredible, really. And the same thing will happen in Britain. It's the only thing that disappoints me about HS2 is at the moment it's going to be built in two sections. The first section is from Birmingham to London, and then the second section will be started, which goes basically north of Birmingham up to Manchester and Leeds. And that won't be completed until 2032. And I'll be probably dead by then. I think it's quite ridiculous that it's taken us so long. I was watching, those of you might have seen it as well, I was watching a programme about China this week. I don't know if you realise, but in 5 years, China has built 6,000 miles of high-speed railways. 6,000.
Yes, but look at the debt problem.
Yeah, I quite agree. It's a huge debt problem. But the point about it is, it doesn't need to take us almost 20 years to build in the region of 200 miles of railway. But this, if I'm still alive, I'm campaigning strongly for HS2 now, and I shall go on campaigning because I believe this is just the beginning. HS2, then there's HS3, HS4, until we get eventually high-speed lines from London down to Plymouth, down to Penzance, to South Wales. Scotland are campaigning very hard for HS2 to be extended beyond Manchester and Leeds, right up to the Scottish border. And Liverpool are also campaigning because they're being left out of the system at the moment. And they're very angry. If Liverpool is not part of the high-speed rail network, a lot more business will go to Manchester and Leeds, and therefore Liverpool are campaigning strongly to be part of this new network. So it's just the beginning. People are starting to realise what it's going to mean for the country. It is a ridiculously long programme, but I understand, I believe it's next month, the new chairman of High Speed Rail, HS2, I forget his name right now, is doing a report to government, and he's going to recommend, from what I understand, he's going to recommend that the whole network, instead of being built in 2 stages, should be built in one go, which would drastically shorten the time of building it, and it will save money. And so the benefits, which are plenty, the benefit, the new business it will bring, the fact that it will release track space on our very crowded railways now, which means you can have more commuter trains, more freight trains, which is very important because all of us who travel on the motorways know how it's chock-a-block with lorries. Well, most of that lorry traffic should be on the railways, but at the moment it's very difficult to get extra pathways because the people talk about the trains are full. HS2 isn't really about seats, it's much more about track capacity. And those of us who work in the industry, and I know there's one other person in this room, Martin, who works in the industry, we know... Okay, well, we know that the big problem on all the main lines, on the East Coast main line, the West Coast main line, the Western main line, the main problem is track capacity. It's actually fitting more trains in because of the pathways. A train can't stop like a car. An emergency stop for a train takes nearly 1.5 miles, which means you have to have a big headway between each train. And that's what track capacity is all about. It's having enough space between each train and fitting more and more trains in. We really, at the moment, we're reaching full capacity. Certainly on the West Coast main line out of Euston up to Birmingham, Manchester and Liverpool, that is almost at track capacity now. HS2 will relieve the existing, what we call the classic line, the existing track, will relieve it of all the long distance trains. They will then use HS2, which means you can then use the spare track capacity for extra freight trains, extra commuter trains, etc. It really is a great future. I'm looking forward to it, if I'm still here.
This is not my area of expertise at all, so I bow to Peter's much more detailed knowledge. But if we're comparing the British railways to the French, I would just point out the SNCF is a nationalised company. They have never denationalised their railways, and whatever decisions are made, and H2 is probably very much influenced by politics, whether we like it or not. Our lives, if you live in a society, are political, even if we choose not to acknowledge that. So I would say, yes, it would be much better if it was done under a nationalised railway.
The Green Party does take a view on HS2, and it's very straightforward. The Green Party position is against HS2. And I think that the idea is that the amount of money being proposed for the building of this railway line could better be used enhancing transport in other ways. When Andrew and Phil and I went along to the recycling plant at Edmonton, we talked about transporting the waste to and from the plant, and they said, yes, we have a canal here. We've looked at the option of having our waste removed from here by canal, and the sticking point is the technology of getting the containers from us, from the shore, and into a transportable form. Now that's the kind of technology, R&D, that we think that's where the money should possibly be going. So now I'm going to go off-piste entirely. That's the Green Party position, right? My own, this is my own personal thought, and that is that my understanding is that HS2 is due to be built in a Y shape. London to Birmingham, and then Birmingham up to Manchester, and Birmingham off to Yorkshire. It seems to me that they should start off with the top of the Y. The north of England is desperately in need of economic development, and if they think that this is going to help them, let them have it. And then that section that goes from Birmingham to London, wait for it, should only be built once it's been agreed that at the same time Parliament and Whitehall move to Yorkshire. Seriously. And that will take a lot of the pressure off us here in London and in Barnet, where we're suffering from the fact that London is sucking in so much energy, so much money, and so many people from not all over, just all over Britain, but all over the world. Let's have two capital cities, and that is my own personal view only.
Might be a good idea, but which Yorkshire town will you move to?
Or it should be Lancashire.
I'm a bit torn on this one. I mean, I do love trains. I'm a big supporter of trains. I thought Peter's explanation of all the Eurostar stuff and high speed was really interesting. And it was an embarrassment when the Channel Tunnel opened and trains used to go high speed through France and then trundle through the English countryside, I think, as President Mitterrand said at the time. And St Pancras obviously is a brilliant station. The way they've done St Pancras up. I think, and you know, people often go on about the half-hour time saving, but it's not about the half hour. I think it is about, as Peter says, about getting extra capacity, and we desperately do need extra capacity on the railways, and we do need to invest more money in our railways, which are poor in comparison with France. And on the issue of privatisation, I think all the existing contracts should just be left to come to an end, and then they would automatically come back into state ownership. I think the unfortunate thing is the government's going to push forward refranchising just before the election, so all those railways are then going to be refranchised again on long contracts.
I know Theresa Villiers is in charge.
So, I mean, I do think HS2 is good. I mean, I do have some concerns about the cost, and I think we do need to, they do need to have a look at the cost and the effect of the route on some parts of the line. But I think, in general, we need to invest much more in our railways.
Okay, we have time just for one public comment.